now would be a good time to start. So, hi everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I am truly honored to be standing on this stage today and to be part of this amazing, amazing conference. So, having written code in various different languages like Python, JavaScript, Clojure. Also, I've developed different data pipelines, and all of those things that I did as a backend developer, they were great. But after a bit over 5 years, I just felt like I needed a new challenge. And what's a better challenge than developing tools for developers? I mean, come on. It's not very easy to get the developers to be happy, right? It's pretty tricky. So that's how I decided to become a DevOps engineer. I wanted to be exposed to a wide range of problems and engineering solutions because every time that I need to develop a new feature or do a change to our architecture, then I need to sit down with some teams, ask them about their problems, and make sure that this solution or new feature actually is good for all of these teams and that it actually answers all of the requirements of the different systems and products that we have in our company. The other thing that I wanted to get from being a DevOps engineer was I wanted to be as far as I can from my comfort zone. I wanted to experience those moments where I sit in front of my computer and I feel so stupid that I don't even understand what's going on, that I think like, how am I going to solve this? Those are the best moments in my working day because when I get over that, I feel amazing. And that's exactly what I wanted to have. And this is a good time to actually start this talk. From a backend developer to DevOps, the force awakens. So, hi everyone. My name is Beisaron. I was a backend engineer for over 5 years, and today I'm a senior platform engineer at Forder for the past 3 years. As I said, I've been developing in Clojure, Node.js, Groovy, Python. My favorite until today is Clojure. I love this language. Also, I'm an international public speaker and a mentor, which means that I love to talk at tech conferences, but I love helping other people become the tech speakers that they want to be. I love that even more. Another crucial thing about me is that I'm a sworn Star Wars fan. I am currently wearing these heels, yeah, and they are very, very painful. So now, let's get down to business. Let's talk about the milestones that I went through to become a DevOps engineer. So we have 3 milestones. The first one is learning. I will talk about the efficient ways and tools that helped me to comprehend complex systems and learn how to use new tools and learn more about the requirements and constraints of the company which I'm at. Then I will talk about how I needed to transition my mindset from being a backend developer creating and developing customer-facing product to developing internal code and tools and emphasizing the significance of internal users' perspective. Last but not least, I will talk about being the force, and I will not tell you what I'm going to talk about there because I don't want to do any spoilers. Come on. So, let's roll. All right. So the first part, learn. This is what I felt. Stressed, like I actually feel now. I am so stressed. But I felt so stressful because I needed to learn about all of these things. I needed to learn about cloud computing. I needed to learn about CI/CD. And it's not that I didn't know anything about it. It's that I didn't know how to develop these tools or what it takes to develop these tools. This is where the stress came in because how am I going to learn all of this? Breathe, my young Padawan. I mean, I'm sure that Yoda used this sentence at some point. Whatever, it's already in the slide. Just let's move on. So, the first thing that helped me tremendously is to use my words. And what do I mean by that? Let's see. So, the first thing that I did is this simple sketch. It's a simplified sketch of Forder's CI/CD pipeline, and I wanted to use my own words to describe what I believe to be Forder's CI/CD pipeline. By doing that, I was able to approach my friends and teammates and ask them if I'm right. I was able to ask them if what I am seeing over, or if what I'm doing over here is actually what's going on. And then they gave me feedback, and I needed to go back and to redo that sketch to actually make it right. So using my words was the first step to describe and to create the architecture flow of what we have in Forder in terms of the CI/CD pipeline, but not only. I actually did those sketches for almost every architecture that we have today. Close the door. Okay, so the next thing that I did was I went back to that CI/CD pipeline of Forder, and I knew that I needed to ask some questions. But asking general questions is not helpful because it is just too much information sometimes, and also general questions about each of the tools is, it's questions that I can ask Google or I can ask ChatGPT for that. But what I needed to ask specifically my teammates was to ask about the why and not the how. Asking calibrated questions means that we're aiming at understanding why things are being done the way that they are done. I want to understand the choices that were made in the company, why those choices were made, why those tools were chosen. So here is an example for a calibrated question, like, what are some common use cases for these tools, and what alternatives were considered for the use case that we have at Forder? So after I started doing those drawings and asking some calibrated questions, I felt this. Wow, my memory was collapsing into it, I felt like that's it, void. I couldn't remember things. I felt like everything is all over the place for me. And, some days I just felt like I need to record everyone, but it's weird. But here's the thing that I did do. I started to take screenshots and to write simple things, simple explanations of how-to guides. For example, over here you can see Jenkins script testing how-to guide. Now, it's kind of a big word to say that this is a how-to guide, because all we have over here is like 3 arrows, and I said paste Jenkins content here. But when you have a bunch of those things where people tell you, oh, this is where you need to press to do this, or this is where you need to go in order to do that, then you start forgetting. So I did those simple, stupid how-to guides. I uploaded them to Confluent, and what do you know? People actually use those. So that's pretty great. So that's the third thing that helped me. Simplicity. Create simple how-to guides. Now let's move over to the next section. Listen. After I learned about the systems, the next thing that I needed to adjust was the way I approach engineering problems. The collaboration with your customers is just as important as the tools and the tech stack that you're creating. So one of my first big tasks was to create an auto deployment or to add some auto deployment to our CD pipeline. And I was so excited about that. I invested so much time in making sure that it's very performant and it's well written. And then it was merged and then I tested it. Everything was great, and I published in every possible Slack channel, hey everyone, we have that auto deployment happening. And the first message that I got, hey May, can we turn that off? Meh. I mean, How is that possible? It's so good what I created. I mean, come on. Don't you guys want this? Okay. If you create a very performant system, it's a very efficient, in terms of cost, and it's super reliable and scalable, but nobody wants to use that system. Is it really that good? Think about it. So what happened there? I mean, why did I not know that the developers don't want this, or that some of the developers don't want this? And that's because I needed to change my mindset. I needed to understand that now my customers are sitting right next to me, down the hall. I'm going to meet them in breakfast. I'm going to see them when I'm going to grab coffee. And this change of mindset meant that I needed to understand that now I am not a backend developer anymore. As a backend developer, when I started to work on a project, I had to go through the requirements of what is needed to be created. I need to add this and this feature. I need things to work this and this way. But nobody told me, hey, this is the way you should write this API because some people are going to use it. Nobody cared how my API looks, except for just having good code practices just so it will be safe and everything, but not usable. I didn't think about usability or experience of people using that code. And that's what it's all about. DevOps is about fostering a culture of collaboration. When you create a piece of code that someone is going to use, you need to collaborate with that person who is going to use that piece of code and make sure that it's well written and that they actually want that piece of code. And that's not the only part of collaboration when I talk about DevOps collaboration. The other part of collaboration is collaborating with other people from the DevOps community. So let's take a look at an example. So my next challenge was to plan the architecture and develop the deployment definition for Kubernetes. And I wanted to learn from my experience where the users were like, meh, we're not sure that we want that auto deployment. And so during that time when I worked on it, I actually had two choices for the implementation. We already had the in-house tool for the infrastructure as code. It's a Python DSL. More specifically, we have CDK with CloudFormation. And the pros of it was easier to develop. We already had our entire infrastructure written in that Python DSL, so it was easier to integrate with. The problem is that it's not industry standard so much. I mean, it can be, but then there are going to be a lot of abstractions. So this brings me to the other option, having an industry standard tool, which is Helm. And the pros of it, I mean, there is a lot of external documentation. And the cons, it means that, first of all, the development is going to be more complex. And also, it means that it's going to be a bit more difficult to do the integration with our current existing infrastructure as code. How am I going to choose? Well, learning from past mistakes, I decided to, first of all, ask the users. So how did I do that? The first thing that I did was I published an architecture design review document. Now, we usually do that. We design some ADR to our team or to the group. But this time, I published the ADR to the entire R&D. I wanted that, if somebody has any interest in our plans, so they can have like a sneak peek and understand what's going on, what we plan to do next. But that's not the only thing that I did, because documents, people don't really like them. So this is what I did next. I opened an invite in the Google Calendar, and I wrote there a preview for our Kubernetes offering. Now this sounds inviting and intriguing, right? Don't answer that. But I guess it did, because people showed up. And what I did in that session was I presented to people the way our Kubernetes offering is going to look like with the Helm. And then also I presented how the Kubernetes offering is going to look like with Python. And so the developers were able to do like a side-by-side comparison. I was also able to ask them if they're interested in learning Helm, or maybe they prefer to stay with the Python DSL that we already have. And by having this open discussion with them, I was able to connect with them, show them my thoughts, and actually show them that I care, that I want to listen to them. One day, when I am done, or not me alone, right, because I'm a part of the DevOps team, but when we're done with developing the Kubernetes offering, we're going to need those developers to do the migrations. We will want their buy-in. So get this. User requests are just as critical as performance, cost, and ease of development when making architecture decisions. And you should remember that, especially if you're going to ask the developers to do migrations later on. Or if you, because not even just for migrations, right? If you develop something for your developers, you're gonna want their adoption, because that's what's going to prove that what you developed actually worth the time of development, the cost of development. And if you incorporate the users in the process of planning that solution, this ensures higher adoption rate. Now here's another thing that I did. I decided to ask the community. Because look, no company is a special snowflake. We all think we are, but we're not. I mean, at the end of the day, every company that has, code as part of its product or the product itself, they're going to need to build their code to create the artifacts, or going to need to deploy their code somehow. Maybe they also need Kubernetes and whatnot. So the tools are going to be pretty similar. There's going to be a lot of similarities in the requirements and use cases. So that's why it makes sense to ask other people from other companies. How did they do the things that they did? How did they choose the tools that they chose? And that's exactly what I did. I started asking around people, why did they choose Helm, or why did they went with Argo CD? I also asked them about the adoption plan. I wanted to know from them how their users felt about Helm. And then I also asked them about the pain points and pitfalls. And I was so surprised by how happy people were to tell me about their failures. They were like, oh, get this, we messed this up so bad, with a big smile. And I mean, come on, just lay low a little bit. It was a failure after all. But then I think that the reason that they were so happy about their failures is because they learned something. And anyway, I was happy to learn about their failures, because it meant that now I know what not to do. Where did I find these people? I'm a friendly person, yeah, but then, I don't have this many friends. So how did I have, the opportunity to ask so many people from the community? Here's the first place that I did that. At meetups and conferences, and not just as a speaker, as an attendee. I stood by, the lunch line, and I started asking around, hey, do you have Kubernetes? Did you migrate already? Or what do you think about Argo CD? I just started asking around. Some people were weirded out by the fact that I started talking randomly to them about Kubernetes. But some people were so nice, and it was just a great talk. Another thing that I did was I reached out to developers and repo maintainers of some of the tools that we have. So for example, we have some Jenkins plugin. I will not tell you which one, but we have some Jenkins plugin, and I reached out to the main repo maintainer of that plugin. And this guy was so nice. And I told him, hey, I didn't open an issue about it because it's not really an issue. It's more a question about the use case. And I would appreciate it if you can give me like a 15-minute meeting with you over Zoom so I can ask you a bunch of questions. He replied, and it was an amazing conversation. The last thing that I did was I joined different Slack workspaces and some of the Discord servers that are out there. There was the Slack workspace of Kubernetes and Jenkins, and also when I did the policy enforcement tool selection, I went in and I started to look around what people are saying about Kyverno, for example. And I learned that this was actually a good tool. And I didn't see a lot of errors from people there. And that's how we chose Kyverno, because I learned from the policy enforcement channel that this was a preferred tool by the people there. And it was great. It actually shortened the amount of time that I needed to invest in my research. So that's it. We reached the last part and my favorite of this talk. Now, I did not tell you what it means to be the force. I'm going to tell you now. But first, I'll tell you what was my next challenge. My next challenge was to plan and prepare the migrations for Kubernetes. And so the way I did that is I decided to use the force. What is this force? Surprise, it's actually nothing new. It's to be in collaboration, is to work in collaboration with the developers. Because as I've seen that by involving users in the design process, they felt heard and valued, which led to increased trust. And it made it easier for us to get buy-in. I knew that what I need to do is to take this up a notch, to take it to the next level. And that's exactly what I did with those Kubernetes migrations. First thing was discovery sessions. I did a discovery session with every team, not just me, obviously. I keep saying I, but I'm not alone. I am part of a wonderful team called Runtime Team at Forder. So this is what we did. We did discovery sessions with each team before we started the migrations. Now, what did we do in those discovery sessions? We asked the developers about their CI requirements. We asked them about their deployment requirements. And we actually asked them about every single thing that they need in order to get their application up and running on production. What it helped us to achieve is that, not achieve, but more prevent a situation where we start a migration and maybe our Kubernetes offering does not support something that they need in order to run their application on Kubernetes. And so if we didn't do those discovery sessions, we wouldn't have known about those things. But this way, we talked with the people, we asked them what is needed, and then we were able to say, okay, we're not going to start the migration yet because we're still lacking 1, 2, and 3 in order to be able to do this migration successfully. The next thing that we did is collaboration sessions. And that was in order to increase trust. Now listen, we have over 120 developers and over 400 services to migrate. It does not make a lot of sense that us as the DevOps team, we're going to migrate all of those services by ourselves. So we needed the teams to do that, but we also wanted to provide support. So we actually just scheduled some time in our calendars where people could join in and ask us questions. And we would just wait in those links, and sometimes people would join and sometimes people didn't. But what it allowed, obviously if people had problems, right, they did not wait for those time slots. But what it allowed was for the developers to know that if they have questions, they can just join the session and we will be there. And they don't need to chase us and try to schedule specific meetings with specific people. We were just there for them. And the last thing, and I think that this might even be the best thing that we did, maybe not, I don't know, but it was a very good thing that we did. It was the documentation feedback loop. Now look, when I say documentation feedback loop, I don't mean that when we got feedback about the documentation, we changed the documentation. Not at all. What I told the developers was this: listen, if you get to a point in the documentation where you don't understand something, just don't do it. Tell us that it was too complicated. And what we did is we went back to the tools and we improved the code and the tools that we provide to the developers. That's it. Because if something is too complicated to explain in a one-pager, it means that I don't need to make the documentation better. It means that I need to make my tools better. I need to improve the tools, not the documentation. And that was the documentation feedback loop. And with that, we're at the finish line. So, what did I talk about today? I talked about how I learned all of those new skills and tools and the architecture diagrams by using my own words to describe them. I talked about how I used calibrated questions to better understand the use cases that we have at Forder. I talked about those simple, stupid how-to guides, and sometimes all you need is just a simple screenshots with a bunch of arrows just so you won't forget how to do some things. And then I talked about listening. The mindset of a DevOps should be the mindset of someone who's trying to provide products to customers who sit just down the hall, providing products to customers who you can meet in your breakfast or when you go get coffee. So the best way to do that is to just remember that user requests are just as critical as performance, cost, and ease of development when making architecture decisions. The last thing, be the force. Invest in communication channels with your users. Do documentation feedback and don't improve just the documentation. Make sure to improve the tools too. And then invest some time in meetings, but don't do too many meetings because nobody likes to have their calendar, all the way, top to bottom all day long with meetings. And now one last thing before we finish. Was it all worth the effort? Definitely yes. And with that, I will say thank you.